Welcome to Cheese in Depth. I'm Michael Landis, and today's sponsored by the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin. With over 1,200 licensed cheesemakers and the only state that requires a license to make cheese, they are also the only place outside of Europe with a master cheesemakers program. Today, I'm talking with Sandy with Hoards Dairyman Farm. Sandy, it's nice to meet you.
My name is Sandy Speich. I work for Hoards Dairyman Farm Creamery. I have been in the cheese industry for 35 years. I started out in the lab working on R&D projects and went on to helping cheesemakers make cheese. This is what I do right now. At Hoards, they wanted to start making cheese. And first they thought they were going to build their own factory, but decided that it was easier for us to ship our milk somewhere else and have it made for us. Okay, W.D. Hoard came to Wisconsin in 1857 from New York. When he got here, he saw that the farmers were mainly growing wheat, and he wanted to convince them to forget the wheat and go into dairy. But it was the mindset of the people that milking cows and making cheese and butter was women's work. So he didn't get very far. Well, he went off to the Civil War and came back, started his own paper, and started writing an agricultural article with every issue of the paper. And when he did come back, the wheat had pretty much taken all the nutrients out of the soil, and the farmers were struggling just a bit. So he was able to convince them to then move on to the dairy industry. So he felt that he should maybe practice what he preached. So he started his own farm just north of Fort Atkinson. And that's a picture of the milking parlor and the visitor center. It's located just north of Fort Atkinson. They've been in business since the late 1800s. Almost always Guernseys. They've had a few jerseys mixed in with the crowd too. This is a picture of the loafing barn. They've had up to 500 Guernseys in that barn.
What kind of bedding do you use?
It's mainly sand. Sand is what's used.
Are these individual pens, or are they just kind of free ranging?
It's all free range. And here are some of the girls. Guernseys are different from the Holsteins. Holsteins are the black and white ones. Guernseys have a higher milk fat and a higher protein. Like for instance, Guernsey's milk fat is 4.51% and their protein is 3.37%. Whereas a Holstein has only a 3.65% fat. So it's quite a bit less fat. And the protein is only 3.06. So with the higher protein and higher fat, you get a better yield. A typical yield for Holstein milk in cheddar cheese is 10%. When we make cheddar cheese, we get between 12 and 13%. So that's quite an addition with that. And then you've got the extra fat, which of course, fat always adds good flavor to everything. Next slide. Here's some more of the girls. Some of these Guernseys can be traced back to the original herd that Hoards started. So they've got quite a history behind them. We ship some of our milk to Edelweiss Creamery in Monticello. The milk is pasteurized and is pumped into the vats at between 86 and 88 degrees Fahrenheit. They add a cheese culture to that and keep it warm and let the cultures do their thing. So what the cultures are doing, the bacteria, is they're multiplying as well as making lactic acid. And they just continue to stir it and keep it warm until it gets to the right acidity that they need. And at that point, then they add a coagulant that will set the milk into what is almost like a thick pudding consistency.
And which cheese is this?
That's the Belaire. And once it gets to that set point where it's the right thickness, then these two gentlemen are right now, they're cutting the cheese into curds. The one on the left is Bruce Workman, and the one on the right is his son, Ben. Bruce is a Wisconsin master cheesemaker. That is something that he worked hard to attain. Ben's working on it. He's not old enough yet. So he'll get there. And you can see that how the curd is cut. It's like long little fingers in there. At this point, the curd is extremely fragile. So they do what they call heal. They let it sit there for 5 to 10 minutes. And in that time, it gets a little bit of a skin on the outside, so that when they start to stir it, it doesn't break up into all little pieces, because those little pieces, which they call fines, go off in the way and your yield goes right down the drain. Here they are stirring the curd, and as they're stirring it, they are also starting to heat it up, and this is called the cook step. And as it's cooking, the culture continues to grow, continues to make acid, and the heating drives the whey out of the curd and makes it smaller and drier. So you can see how big the curd is at this point. You can see how much smaller it's gotten as it's been stirring. And while all that's going on, Bruce is on the other side of the wall, and he is setting up the forms. They pump it through the wall and into the forms. And it takes quite a few people to keep up with all that stuff coming through the hose there. And that's just another slide of how fast that curd is coming out of that hose. So they level it off because they want each round of cheese to be about the same weight. And here you can see how much smaller the curd has gotten. A lot of the moisture has been pushed out of it from the heating, and the whey is draining off of it. And as it sits there, it does what is called knitting. The curds start to form together, and you can see that's one solid piece right now. And what they'll do is they'll take it out of that form, turn it upside down, put it back in the form, and they'll do that probably 3 to 4 times, as well as they'll stack one on top of the other. The weight of the one on top helps to push the whey out of the cheese on the bottom. And they'll continue to do that for the 3 or 4 times, and then they'll take it out of the forms and stick it into a salt brine, and it will stay there overnight. The salt will be absorbed into the cheese, and it gives you that salt flavor. And the next morning, they'll take it out of the brine, they'll put it on a shelf and let it dry, and then they'll package it. Okay, Belaire is a pour salute style. It's very similar to a high-fat Munster because we have that fat from the Guernsey milk. This is our very first cheese we put on the market. We got the marketing group together and we were trying to decide what to name it. And my boss wanted it to be connected to the Isles of Guernsey. So we kind of went round and round with it, and it was Captain Belaire that brought the first Guernseys to America. So that's how we settled on the name Belaire.
So talk about the rind on this.
The rind is actually just food coloring. When you made Munster in Europe, they actually put a schmear on the outside that turned the cheese red, similar to a Limburger, but the flavor profile is not, from the smear cheese, is not really as acceptable here in the United States as is in Europe. So they decided just to put red food coloring on the outside, which is similar with Munster.
So that's interesting that you know, it's named after the captain that brought the first cattle across. I would have never guessed that because you know, a lot of times it's named after the cities or things like that. So that's really interesting. Port Salut is one of my favorite cheeses. I love how creamy it is. I love how soft this is. This is such a easy to snack cheese. So much butter in here, and easy for just about any cheese board. I didn't want to make it into a really big deal about its pairing. I really wanted the pairing to be relatively light. So I chose a quince paste, or a quince, and this is from Girl Meets Dirt out of the Northeast. And cracker-wise, again, didn't want anything that would be overly powerful, so a little fire hook, their sea salt, and a little Mediterranean flavor there. So that's what I thought. What do you usually pair with this?
My family just eats it, takes it out of the refrigerator, slices it, and eats it. It's a great melting cheese. We just had stromboli the other night. We made it using it in lasagna. Grilled cheeses are fantastic. They're really very good. So if there's anything you want, cheese to melt on, that's a good choice.
Because it's so light, the only thing that you really don't want to add any real rich flavors to it, so I chose a toasted lager from Blue Point. Just something really light, but it adds a little bit of maltiness to it, and I think it balances out some of the flavors. But I agree with you. If you want to do a grilled cheese sandwich or something to grill on this is magnificent. I mean, it almost just melts at room temperature.
It certainly melts in your mouth, that's for sure.
It does. It does.
Okay, the next cheese is Sark. Again, trying to keep in with the Isles of Guernsey. One of the islands is called Sark, so we settled on that. It is one of the cheesemakers. He does make cheese, this Better Case cheese for himself as well, using different milk. It is one of his well-known cheeses, if you will.
There you go.
I don't know if you can see, oops. There are some little bit of holes that are in there. Those are called mechanical holes. And because this cheese is not pressed, it is just allowed to drain on its own. Not everything knits together. So those are what are called mechanical holes. And that is acceptable as far as into a contest. So this cheese is really buttery, it's mild, and has a slight acid flavor.
So I saw that the description is this Budakos like triple creme. Can you
yes.
explain that a little bit?
Because it has all that extra fat in there from the Guernseys.
So with all this tangy, buttery flavor, I wanted to bring in something a little bit more savory with it. So I chose some prosciutto. These are Divina grilled olives and a little bit of petite toast. And to wash it down a little bit, a daytime IPA. Something a little light, but it has just enough hops in there to kind of kick up the spiciness in there. So that's a direction that I took, giving it a chance to have a little bit more of a lunchtime feel or a bigger snack. I thought it could really hold up to it, and I really just, looking, at it, it's just such a beautiful, creamy cheese. Both of these two are just excellent in creaminess and butter.
It's another one that melts quite well too.
Yeah.
And on a sandwich is very good.
Yeah, I could see that. And I like the tanginess. There's just enough in there to give it a little bit of a kick without being overly powerful or overly tangy. But it's really nice. Just a great little cheese.
Okay, now we'll talk about the Gouda. This is our new one that's out on the market. It's another one of Bruce's milestone cheeses. We were trying to decide what cheese to come out with next. He goes, oh, your milk would be very good in a Gouda. So that's what we did. We came out with a Gouda. And if you hold up a piece of the Gouda, you can see that this also has holes in it, but the holes are very round. This cheese uses a culture that makes a buttery flavor, but that culture also makes a little bit of gas. So that's what's making a little bit of holes that are in the Gouda. And this is acceptable in Gouda cheese. This cheese is very nutty. It has a buttery flavor and just a hint of acid.
When you get into the Goudas, a lot of people naturally assume that they're going to be maple caramel in the flavor. This has got such a nice sweetness to it, but it also has just a little hint of tang, which is not I wouldn't say like with the last cheese where it's got a tangy, but this has some light acidity to it, which I think is really nice. That makes it really easy to pair I chose to use Bonnie's Jams, and it's an apricot orange, a little bit of citrus and sweetness with the Gouda, along with an Effie's oat cake. I like their originals, and so you get a little bit of the butter, a little bit of the sweetness, makes it really, really simple. And I'm pairing it up with Maduro Brown. It's a local Cigar City beer right around here in Tampa. And it's a really nice brown ale, which adds a little bit of maltiness to it. So I think it kind of balances out some of those flavors. That Gouda is fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite one so far.
I'm glad we waited until it was ready.
Yes, it's only 7 months old, so it's kind of young for Gouda.
It is, and a lot of times, you know, when again you get a Gouda that's rock hard or so overpowering in the sweetness that you really don't appreciate the quality of the milkiness that this has. And that's kind of like the nice part about this Gouda is just there's so much buttery flavor in there that really gives it that classic flavor, along with very enjoyable. Again, you know, this is another cheese that's got a tremendous amount of moisture to it to be able to melt beautifully. And
Yes.
you know, I could see, you know, doing this on just about any type of sandwich. This has just got so much meltability on it.
Put it on a burger, really good.
And we're getting about that time again.
Just about, yeah. Okay, we found a Union Star factory up in Berlin, Wisconsin. Bruce and Ben do not make cheddar cheese. So we contacted John Metzik up in Union Star to make cheddar cheese for us. It is basically the same as making the Port-Salut, the Belaire, until you get to this point here. He's already done the cooking. You can see the curds are quite small. So what he's done is push the curds off to the side, and this is called ditching. So this allows the whey to drain off of the curd. So after they allow most of the whey to drain off, they will cut it into slabs, and they will start flipping it. And then as they flip it, then the next time they'll go 2 high and 3 high, and they'll continue to do that. And the culture continues to make the acid, and the weight of the curd on top of each other pushes the whey out. You can see the slabs have gotten longer and thinner, and I think he's up to 6 high right now. And you can see he's holding it with one hand. It is already knit together quite well. It's very, very strong knit together. So he kind of throws them around a little bit. This process is actually called cheddaring, and it lays on top of each other. It pushes the whey out. And as it's doing that, it's also, the culture is still doing its job. It's still producing lactic acid. And they flip it so that they can get the weight distributed. They also try and keep it warm. So that's why usually the ones that are on the bottom end up on the top, so that because the vat is still warm. Now it's time to run it through the curd mill. So they run it through this machine, which is really a dangerous thing. It's got open knives that are just spinning away in there. And it kicks out curds cut into the uniform shapes. So, okay, now they've cut it all into little curds, so now they're salting. They're spreading salt over the curd and they're mixing it in. They add the salt in 3 increments. If you add all the salt at once, a lot of salt will go off in the whey. Now this is the point where you buy cheese curds. These are the cheese curds. And if you ever get a chance to get a cheese curd right out of the vat, that's the way to do it. So now John is putting the curd into a bucket and weighing it because he wants all of the blocks to be about the same weight. They're pushing the curd down into the forms. And now they put the forms on their side and they put it into a press. So with this pressing, they'll press it overnight. There shouldn't be any mechanical holes or openings in this cheese at all. And the next morning they'll take it out of the press and they'll put it in a bag and put it in a box and then store it forever long they need it. W.D. Hoard was a governor of Wisconsin for a couple of years. So that's why we decided to call it Governor Select. This cheese that we're tasting today is a little over a year old.
You're using a sharp cheddar, white cheddar, not colored, and you're using all Guernsey milk. So that's, different there where everybody else is, orange, extra sharp, and Holstein.
Well, we chose not to color it because not only does Guernsey milk have higher fat and protein, but it also has some beta carotene in it, which makes the milk itself a more buttery, creamy colored as opposed to white. So then as it gets made into cheese, it's more of a cream color as well. So that's why we decided not to color it.
The first thing that I noticed on this is that a lot of cheddars, especially at a full year's age, are, really just crumble and fall apart. This has got a lot of butter to it, so I'm getting more of a flexibility in it than typically, in a lot of these cheeses. So I think that gives it a lot of credit for the amount of butter and richness that you have in here. That tanginess is really nice and balanced. I get a little bit of that lactic acid, maybe a little hint of lemon on there. And so it's just, we've got such a nice, rich balance of flavors. I'm pairing it up with Perseverance Society. This is pepper jelly, 4 peppers in a little jelly, a little bit of apple cider vinegar in there. And on just a regular sourdough cracker, just a little bit. It's got a little rosemary in it to give it a little bit of flavor. And for the beverage, I went with a Dale's Pale Ale. A little bit of hoppiness, but not too much, but something to be able to cut into the cheddar a little bit. With all that butter, it can really stand up to something with a little hoppy, and so that's why I went with Dale's. Thought that'd be fun. And,
okay.
With this cheese, it really takes out any of that heat from the peppers. And so you really get more of the pepper. You get kind of like a souped up pepper jack, it gives that little bit of tang to it, but it also has that zip to it that this has.
Yeah, this cheddar too is really very nice because it cleans up. You get that initial flavor, but it doesn't linger. So then it's, as that clears out of your palate, it's like, I think I need some more.
Yeah, it definitely has a really nice balance of flavor, and that tanginess is just exceptional.
Well, that's what happens here in Wisconsin.
That's right. Anything else you'd like to say about the farm, cheese making, cheeses, things you got coming up?
Yeah, next week we're going to make another bat of cheddar. And we're also going to be making a dry jack, which is something that John Metzick has been quite successful with. The following week, we're going to make another bat of cheddar, and we're going to try making what is called a Dunlop cheese, and that's a Scottish cheese. It's similar to a cheddar, but a little bit on the sweeter side. Well, and then for the farmers markets this summer, we're going to make a Longhorn Colby.
It'll be round or square?
The Longhorn Colby will be round. There is a company here in Wisconsin that makes Longhorn Colby, and I've introduced it to a lot of my family. And when they know that I'm going, they all want some. So I end up buying the whole horn, which when I tell them I want the whole thing, they look at me like I'm crazy. But I bring it home and cut it up, and away we go.
Well, I think I'll have to have you back on in the summer, and we can talk about the cheeses that you're doing and what's at the markets. That'd be fun.
Okay, that sounds good. Kobe. Oh, yeah, yeah. And John makes a good one.
Yeah, well, good. So anything else you'd like to say before we head out?
No, I think that's all. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It was nice meeting you, and I'm glad that we had time to be able to taste some of your cheeses, and they are exceptional for those that are watching but haven't ordered the cheese, definitely go and take the time to order these cheeses. These are exceptional. You'll impress your friends with the buttery flavor of each of these cheeses, and they will turn into your next favorite cheese. I promise you. So
I'm sure they will, yes.
So Sandy, thank you so much for sticking with us here, and I really appreciate you sending the cheese and taking the time. So hope you best of luck on the next round of cheeses, and hopefully I'll see you in the summer.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Michael.
All right, you're very welcome. All right, take care. Thank you for watching. Today was sponsored by the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin. With over 1,200 licensed cheesemakers in the only state that required a license to make cheese, they are also the only place outside of Europe with a Master Cheesemakers program. Today's program will be on my YouTube channel, Michael Landis Cheese. You can also find out more information on michaellandischeese.com.